Will you be there when the stars align?
Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1249 of our daily content grind. Today, I thought we'd look back at another Transformers toy line that we don't really hear about or talk about much anymore, but this one technically isn't its own line. It is a subset of Transformers that, just due to popularity and success, seem to continue on through multiple iterations of the movie lines. And this is, of course, Human Alliance, which was essentially a second take on alternators, large-size cars, the type of scale that car collectors would really enjoy. But this allowed for them to do a lot more than what alternators was doing. Whereas alternators was all about trying to mimic what a collectible car toy was like, this was about creating a way of putting the human characters into the Transformer line, because of course they got the bulk of the screen time in the Bayverse. So in order to do that, large-scale figures, wildly out of scale with the rest of the line, but as its own subset, that's perfectly fine. The toys had interiors that the human drivers could actually sit inside, as well as seats on weaponry that the humans could pilot when the robots were in vehicle mode, giving you a lot more play value than an alternator provided. So this was something of an evolution of the concept, and it went pretty well. This continued on for a few years. So this starts off in 2007. So Takara, being completely swamped at the time, turns to Shogo Hasui in order to create what this concept would be. And this is the origin. It is a 07 Ratchet that was heavily kit bashed to show off and basically just proof of concept what Human Alliance would be. You can see where the new shoulder on the right side would have actually allowed him to sit inside Ratchet in vehicle mode. And yeah, the transforming weaponry up at the top that was in the robot, that was in the vehicle mode. I don't think any kind of rescue vehicle is going to have like a mounted missile turret, but you know what? You do you. I'm not going to judge how you choose to wage your war. But that said, everyone seemed to like it. So this actually carried through. I just like the idea that we've actually seen the prototype. It's actually kind of rare this kind of like conceptual kit bashing stuff gets seen by the public. So it's kind of cool that we got to see it. The line obviously begins with Bumblebee, of course. Who else is it going to start with? I put this on my list of the top 10 Transformers of the decade back in the day. And while, my opinions of movie-verse designs have soured over the years, I will still show this toy a tremendous amount of respect. Apparently, when they were originally designing these toys, the designers were instructed to just give them a, passing resemblance to the toys the characters themselves, and Hasui-san jokes later on that he accidentally made a really good-looking Bumblebee. And it is a really good-looking Bumblebee. It's surprisingly good-looking, considering, that was not the plan. The plan was just get the human interactivity in. Everything else was a byproduct. But no, this toy is dead solid. This is still a really, really good figure. One of the better Bumblebee toys. Nothing's fiddly. Nothing's too thin. It's just a dead solid figure. And as such, obviously, this one saw the light of day multiple times. This toy got reissued later on, but we also got a kind of a stealth repaint as well. Bumblebee always looks good with the black and yellow's dominance inverted. Yellow on black just looks really, really nice. So, either or, really good toy. The mold following up was Sideswipe. Ironically, alternators also followed its initial offering with Sideswipe. So, once upon a time, I did a review for this channel that was split screen. Two of me on the screen at the same time, and the joke here was that I was torn, and this is legitimately why I did the whole review format this way. I was torn on this because there's some elements of this that were really, really good, and some elements of it I really, really didn't like. Despite this large scale, they still hadn't properly fixed the problem with having wheels for feet. You know, his stance was not very good, especially for how much more back-heavy this was than Bumblebee. Also, the tubes on the hips to recreate that piston look, those never worked. None of the Sideswipe toys that had those rubber little pistons, none of them worked. So, yeah, like, it was just like a half and half. I was kind of like, part of me loves this, part of me hates this. But it's an okay toy overall. It's just kind of meh. I don't think it's the most impressive follow-up to Bumblebee. Much like I didn't think Alternator Sideswipe was much of a follow-up to Smokescreen, weirdly enough. But you did get your Sergeant Epps out of this one. And also, you did have other ways of getting this one. The black repaint with Michaela came out. This is, I believe, Shadow Blade Sideswipe. This looks good. I mean, okay, some of the design problems aside, this just looks really, really good. I mean, it's a color scheme that's not going to go wrong. It's black and silver. You know, we threw in some copper and some dark translucent blue for you. It just looks really, really slick. It's a really nice looking figure, I'm not going to lie. And then they followed it up with this thing. This was part of a multi-pack, and we're not going to talk about that human that's riding on top of Sideswipe here. He's inconsequential to this, because in this multi-pack, Sideswipe did not have a partner figure. He's just kind of on his own. And normally, black silver with the neon green would absolutely do it for me, but that baby blue is throwing me off, as is just how overdone he looks in the vehicle mode. I'm not a fan of the translucent green, and I don't like the Autobot Alliance just written on the side of the car. Not much of a robot in disguise, I feel. Is what it is, though. So this is not a strict list, by the way. We are bouncing around everywhere. We're going to cover all the large figures first, and then and obviously we're covering all the repaints as we go. Which means we have to now talk about Skids. So, admittedly, it's not nearly as bad of a toy as the Deluxe. Obviously, the design work is carrying all the same sins as the Deluxe, but as far as just being a good toy that represents Skids from the movie, yeah, this one does better than his standard toys. I will give him that at least. You know, and this was also the first way to get Michaela for your collection if you really wanted to collect the entirety of the human cast, so you were kind of stuck buying him. Now, originally, here's the weird thing. Here's one of the weird things that happened in this line, because Human Alliance had a bunch of weirdness plagued with it, just like Alternators did. This was originally going to be the slot in the way for Ratchet. Ratchet and Ironhide were slated for this line. However, the vehicles were just too big to release at that price point. They didn't want to do a secondary price point just for a couple characters. So they ended up doing Skids and Mudflap instead. But Skids and Mudflap were actually too small for the price point. So instead, they started coming with the bike partners, which means we got RC out of this set. And this one is actually designed to match the motorcycle that Michaela rode in the movie herself. That way, it had a little bit of a stronger connection to the minifigure that was included. Rather than just being like a faithful adaptation of that character. So you know what? Fine. It still looks good. I'll give it that. It's nice of them to have included something and like acknowledge the fact that like, yeah, this really wasn't panning out. This did get repainted for his Dark of the Moon look. Now, obviously, he was stripped from the movie with only a brief few seconds of his vehicle mode appearing. But the toys still came out, and they came out in this black deco design to separate them from the original movie. You are getting another Sergeant Epps here. So we're starting to double up on some of the characters through all of this. But you are also getting Elita 1. So, yeah, you have it's just a straight up purple repaint. So no real shock or surprise there, but you're filling out your ranks, which is pretty much the only goal here. I will apologize for the next example. I don't have a picture of the minifigure included. Kind of slipped in my mind on that one, But it's nothing terribly exciting, don't worry. But we do have to talk about Mudflap. And again, yeah, they didn't, it's the same old design. You are getting Simmons, and I think, like, this was like a $30 set when it came out. I think that's pretty good for a Simmons with a free toy thrown in that you can just throw out. But this one, here's a couple weird things about this one. Number one, because of the distribution at the time, Mudflap ended up being an incredibly rare figure. Like, this thing is actually pretty valuable to get a hold of nowadays, especially with the knowledge that Hasbro is likely never doing the twins again. This is the best toy that this character is ever going to get. So, yeah, getting this one on the aftermarket is not easy and not cheap. But you know what? Again, it looks fine. And I will say, the deluxe Mudflap from Revenge of the Fallen, horrible toy. Absolutely horrible toy, deeply flawed in an engineering level, not to mention just very unpleasant looking and overly complicated. Overly complicated too. You can tell I don't like it. You can tell that was at one time going to be a Plastic Addict toy. The figure I do not have a picture of here is the Chromia that came with it, which actually was new tooling. And that's on me. That's on me for missing it. I apologize for that. But just imagine, like, you did have a motorcycle option for Simmons. Not that I would ever imagine him riding a motorcycle. Later in the line came Jazz. I believe this was in the 2010 assortment, which is ironic because by then he was dead by 3 years, but they still made an expensive toy for him. And I had this one. I think I still have it somewhere. It's a pretty solid Jazz toy. It's still doing some of the weird things, like his arms are just way too thin for my preference, but it's definitely doing better than the Deluxe did, so I'm going to give it that. This is how you got your Captain Lennox to complete your human cast. I believe that's all there was. I think those are like the bulk of the humans. Everything else is variation, and then we start getting into crazy stuff. But you can see he also came with a motorcycle that actually transformed into Jazz's shield gun. And I always thought that was a really clever way of giving Lennox more to do as a minifigure, but also incorporating Jazz's armaments as well. It's a really neat design. It's a really clever choice. Continuing on with the large scale. If you went to Target during Dark of the Moon, you could get your hands on your own Leadfoot. Which I believe came with a character named Sergeant Detour. And we're going to start getting into really fun made-up humans for this one. He also comes with Steeljaw, who, design-wise, is supposed to transform into his engine in vehicle mode. That was the original intention behind... Not Lockjaw, Steeljaw. Apologize. And not the Steeljaw from the later movie that's a bad guy. This is just a good pupper. No. He did not form an engine. He didn't transform. He can form a gun. He does transform into a missile launcher, so you have that. The toy is not good. I'll tell you that. I've got this one sitting. Someone donated this for Plastic Addict many moons ago. And that was obviously before life became too busy for me to handle Plastic Addict. It's still sitting in the wings waiting for that day. I have not given up on eventually getting a review of this toy out there in some fashion. But yeah, it's not a great figure. It's just genuinely not. And what makes it worse is when you look at his counterpart, which is Roadbuster, and Roadbuster is really good. I had this toy, I don't have it anymore, but I can remember this one actually being really solid. It's using its kibble and excess parts really well. All the vehicle bulk is being hidden nicely. It's a surprisingly clean figure for how chaotic his vehicle mode tends to be. It looks real good. I actually really, really like the look and play of this figure. His human figure, where is it on my list? Because I can never remember these offhand. Sergeant Recon. This does not look like a character who does recon. He is literally armed for battle in his NASCAR mode, which is one of the problems that those toys always had. The Wreckers could never get a solid set of figures that were either all NASCAR or all armored, like mask-looking vehicle. It was Studio Series by the time you actually got a consistent trio that that all had the same aesthetic. Everyone always had, there was either one character missing or one character wasn't done up the same way as the others. One or the other, and it was chaos. But no, this one I enjoyed. This one I actually remember really, really liking. The Decepticons got in on this a little bit too. And just like the previous line alternators, there's barely any to account for, at least in this size scale. Barricade did get a figure, and his partner being Frenzy, which obviously is not a human alliance, but who else you going to pair with Barricade? Design-wise, yeah, he was fine. He got the important points across, and he was solid enough to stand and be just a decent little Barricade figure. So, credit to them. And yeah, I think it's just hysterical to see Frenzy in the driver's seat rather than being part of the engine. And the other one was Soundwave, who I never really liked the design of. I'll give it credit for including Mr. Gold as our human villain from Dark of the Moon. So good on you. That made sense. And throwing in Laserbeak as a bonus was great too. Laserbeak doesn't really do anything. It's just kind of there. Soundwave does look really, really good, but I never liked how weird his proportion was. Like, so wide shoulders and gorilla armed with such skinny legs. I mean, yeah, he was heavy in the torso in the movie, but not to this degree. Like, this is a very large exaggeration on his design elements, and that always kind of ruffled me the wrong way. It looks fine, but it doesn't look as great as it could be. Barricade was kind of rare to find at retail, as for a bit, because he was the popular one. He was a popular character. But Soundwave kind of fell into the same hole as Mudflap, where distribution-wise, Human Alliance wasn't moving enough at the time to actually get those out into stores. Most people only got this by ordering them from overseas or waiting for a reissue. There was, I believe, a 2-pack reissue of Barricade and Soundwave. There you could get both of the rare Decepticons, and that's about the only real reliable way anyone ever had of getting a hold of them. And that does it for the bulk of the main line. However, the line was extended in Dark of the Moon. In order to create like a Scout class scale for toys, we had smaller Human Alliance figures, which were almost all made-up characters, with the exception of Spike appearing in one figure. But that is, we'll get to that in a bit. Let's go through, and we're going to start with, I think, who was universally the most popular, and that would be Ice Pick. So yeah, this is where you get the idea. Yeah, much smaller vehicles, things that humans would typically ride rather than pilot or drive. And yeah, they all had a weapon mode that larger figures could use, specifically designed, I assume, for like either leader scale or Human Alliance toys themselves, though not all of them could be used by the Human Alliance figures. Go figure. But yeah, Ice Pick looks good in every mode. Everyone loved the idea of the chainsaw mode. Like, that's just very appropriate for a Decepticon weapon. Sergeant Chaos driving. I have never associated Chaos with a snow speeder, like with a snowmobile. I've got Star Wars on the mind. I'll tell you why later. I guess the chaos comes from the fact that he willingly puts his head right in the middle of where his harpoons are stored. These smaller ones are also, you'll notice, where the C-clip gimmick was used heavily, because this is about that era where toys just started randomly throwing in these weapons you could attach onto little bars across the toys. There is a repaint out there in the orange and black deco. It is very Halloween, but I think it looks kind of good. I don't mind it here. He comes with a different mold that's been repainted and renamed Sergeant Chaos, but the big thing here is the fact that he's the other half of that Sideswipe 2-pack, so he also has Autobot Alliance logos all over him. His package marks him as a Decepticon, and that he is out hunting for Sideswipe. So figure that one out for me. Let's say he's undercover and doing a very poor job of it. This is Backfire. It's another one of the more basic ones. He is a trike, 2 wheels in front, 1 wheel in back. This is our Spike Witwicky, and as you can tell, he does not look like Spike Witwicky because he's wearing a combat helmet of some kind. Again, pretty decent figure. The giant gun mode is for obviously larger figures, and it's not a bad looking one. It's kind of cool looking. This one, again, all around, is not too bad all around. A lot of these kind of rail on the like above average scale, considering they all have like a Target Master style mode. That's kind of to be understood. The repaint does come with a better Spike, Not as great of a color scheme, though. I'm not as big on, like, the off-white and the red here. But this came in a multi-pack along with a Bumblebee. I can't remember which Bumblebee offhand it is. The chest makes me say Cannon Bumblebee, but it also might just be mistransformed, and I can't tell which one it is. You'll forgive me. There's a lot of Bumblebee Deluxes. I can't remember every single one of them. Point being, this on display is kind of impossible. So, the irony to some of these 2-packs is that the toys that they are packed in with can't actually hold them. For the case of Ice Pick, Sideswipe cannot hold that toy because his hands are not shaped the right way, and the box has to warn you about that. Whereas in this one, this is just a standard deluxe Bumblebee with a ball-jointed shoulder. He has no shot of holding that toy up unsupported. None whatsoever. So this is technically not really doable, which is a little bit false advertising, but, whatever. I'm sure someone figured out how to get him to hold it. Probably not hold it straight like he's using it, but probably figured out some way to do it. It also makes it weird because that makes this Bumblebee toy the only Human Alliance figure that didn't have anything to do with the whole Human Alliance part. Thunderhead with Major Tungsten. Such an action movie name. I personally never liked this toy. Aside from the fact the vehicle mode just felt extremely lazy, like that quadruped tank, that just, I've never really liked them. I don't see them making sense unless you're on the moon. And I don't like the integration here. It becomes a mech suit for the human driver, and which would make sense. I'm sure that's cool for some people. For me, it just kind of feels like Thunderhead is using a human meat shield. It just seems really weird to have your human partner just out there in front to take the shots for you. I don't know. I was never a fan of this one. This was Plastic Attic bound because I just thought the concept of it was terrible, and I thought the transformation was incredibly lackluster. And that kind of went for the repaint as well. This is Crosshairs with Sergeant Caney, which is not nearly as cool of a name. I will give it credit. The two-tone green with a little bit of yellow, you're hitting my sweet spot in color scheme. I do think it looks better. I don't think the concept's better, though. I don't think paint job's going to save that. Moving on to Sandstorm, because, this was at an age when any dune buggy was called Sandstorm, and his partner, Private Deadcliff, who I always think is Private Deadlift. I don't know. The missile rack mode's kind of interesting. I don't think I'd stick my feet down in front of it like Private Deadcliff is going to do. That seems just a wee bit risky to me. But the robot mode looks fine. I thought the robot mode and the vehicle mode looked really, really good, considering it has to accommodate a human driver. Like, that's a pretty big sacrifice normally, but it's handling it really well. That goes for the repaint, too, with a much more Arctic look to it. You got a new pilot, which in this case is Major Altitude. Major Altitude. Oh my god. I love the names in this line. But the robot's name is Half Track. You will note he does not have a half track. It's just a name lying around. Let's meet Reverb with Sergeant Detour. Again, odd names. This one I actually really like the design of. This is actually really unique. I like the weapon mode. It's just like a giant wind turbine. That's different. You can view it as a shield. I like to just think that all three of those turbines are forward for a reason. The hoverbike mode always looks cool, but it also looks like it's not possible because that's all the lift on that vehicle's on the left side. There doesn't seem to be anything on the right side to compensate, which means it's going to be a very unbalanced vehicle. This one is just going to be doing just aileron rolls over and over and over. But I don't know aviation, so I don't know if this is actually a possible design. Someone in the comment section will tell me. I do think the overall look is cool, though. I will give it credit for a unique vehicle mode. I'll give it all the credit in the world for that. This is Autobot Whirl with Major Sparkplug. We finally got a character named Sparkplug in Transformers, and it's not Spike's dad. The robot mode is interesting. It's very spindly, which take it for what it is. I will not tell you if you like it or not. I personally don't mind it. The big ski feet are weird, but I don't know. I think it's decent enough. I like the little mini helicopter. I think the mini helicopter adds some really good variety to this whole line. And yeah, the chain gun, that's actually a really cool use of the helicopter blades. I like that. Obviously, it's hollow in some spots, but we'll look past that because the overall look is really, really cool. Yeah, this is one of the better ones. This was one of the better ones. Are you ready for my favorite human name in this entire line? I saved it for near the end for a reason. So this is Dragstrip. Of course it is. It's an indie car that's yellow. You're going to name it Dragstrip. And the toy itself does look pretty cool. I like the big blades hanging off of him. Like, that's a neat little weapon. And he's not looking too much like G1 Dragstrip. Shares the main colors, but other than that, doing his own thing. That's appropriate. The human pilot's name is Major Disaster. I love it. That's, oh my god, that's such an 80s villain name. That's such an 80s villain name. I feel like you should be in Mask. I feel like that should be like the Miles Mayhem replacement is Major Disaster. Or like a Captain Planet villain. Major Disaster sounds like a Captain Planet villain. This is, again, one of the better ones. Like, he forms a shield, which is pretty easy from an Indy car. I'll give him that. And then, yeah, he just looks good in the robot. No real complaint on that one. But that's going to bring us to the final one, and I think the most ambitious. Because this one is actually really, really cool for a few reasons. This is Tailpipe. And Tailpipe was the smallest one of them all because he comes with a partner figure, which is Pinpointer. He's a target master. He's the first character we got in a long, long time that actually approached target master. Now, on the vehicle mode, it forms the storage box on the back of the motorcycle, but again, it has a weapon mode. It can actually turn into a gun mode for Tailpipe to use. And then you have what is, again, a hoverbike mode, which also acts as like a dual spinning salad shooter type weapon. It's a really, really neat figure. Probably the best one, in my opinion. I think the robot looks nice. The Target Master thing integrated is a really cool touch. It just has a lot going on for it, and it's doing a lot for the size class. So this is the one. Like, this is the one. I think this is probably my favorite one out of the entire line, for lots of different reasons. But that is the end. They did not survive past Dark of the Moon, and as we said, a lot of the toys that came out of the tail ends of these lines ended up being super, super rare, because they were flooded with the earlier releases, and the distribution just could not get them out. Which leaves you some very interesting pieces in your collection if you do have them. But otherwise, I think these were really, really good. I would not mind them revisiting this, despite knowing they would be crazy expensive these days, but I really wouldn't mind a G1 Bumblebee with a spike pilot. How iconic is that for us Transformer fans? It was a novel idea, continuing what alternators created and then building off of it into something that had a lot more play value and a lot more characters going on. So overall, yeah, this was a really, really good line for as long as it managed to last. But that is your history lesson for the day. That is the entirety of the Human Alliance line. So there, take your education. Go into the world now. Try to find something fresh for your collection. But that's it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.
The day is getting closer. My journey is almost over. And when it is, our journey begins. The question is, when the stars align, will you be there?